"You need to move, sir. This seat isn't for people like you." Those 9 words sliced through the first-class cabin like cabin pressure cracking a window. Sharp, sudden, unmistakable. They came from a flight attendant with perfectly pressed navy blues and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and they landed hard on Marcus Carter, row 1A aisle. It was 7:40 p.m. on a Thursday. The aircraft hadn't left the gate, but tension had already taken off. Passengers turned, not all at once, just enough for the discomfort to feel curated. One man in 1B shifted his briefcase, avoiding eye contact. A woman across the aisle pursed her lips, then glanced at the window like it might offer an exit. Marcus didn't speak. Not yet. He simply looked at her. He wore a charcoal gray custom suit, Italian wool, single-breasted over a crisp white shirt. No tie. His shoes, oxblood leather, glowed subtly beneath the cabin lights. A brushed steel timepiece peeked from his cuff, nothing flashy, everything deliberate. The kind of look that whispers wealth instead of shouting it. And still not believed. "Is there a problem?" His voice was calm, measured. The kind of calm that only comes from decades of knowing how fast dignity can evaporate at altitude. The flight attendant, her name tag read Alyssa, didn't flinch. She gestured toward a silver-haired couple standing in the galley. "They're frequent executive guests. We've reassigned 1A to Mr. Bennett. Please cooperate, or we'll have to involve airport security." Marcus blinked slowly. No anger, no resistance. Just silence, the kind that unnerves people who expect you to fight. From row to C, a young black woman pulled out her phone and opened the camera. She didn't hit record. Not yet. But her thumb hovered over the button like a reflex trained by too many similar moments. Alyssa leaned in. "I'm asking nicely." And that's when it happened. A voice from the back, casual but cutting. Man probably printed his boarding pass at home. Laughter from row 5, a chuckle from 3A, the kind that says, "We're not all thinking it." But someone said it. Marcus stood, not quickly, not defeated, just enough to take up space. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Marcus. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw a punch. He folded his boarding pass, placed it in his inside pocket, and stepped into the aisle only for Alyssa to block his way. "Sir, we'll need to reseat you near the back." He nodded once, no resistance. But as he walked down the aisle past the silver-haired couple, who were already settling into 1A like royalty, he pulled out his phone and typed just for words to his assistant. "Trigger it, midnight drop." He wasn't done flying. He was about to make someone else land. Row 23 wasn't made for men like Marcus Carter. The seat barely reclined, the overhead light flickered, and the passenger beside him smelled like 3 layovers and too much cologne. But Marcus sat there calm, composed while the engines began their slow hum toward takeoff. The silver-haired couple in 1A clinked glasses. Alyssa hadn't looked back once, but the young woman into seat she was watching, not just him, the whole thing, her phone now in her lap, recording quietly, angled just enough to capture the aisle. Across the cabin, whispers rose like turbulence before a storm. "Is that him? Wait, I think I know that face. No way he's flying, coach." Someone tapped on their screen, zoomed in, a search bar opened. Marcus Carter, capital tech billionaire. The image that popped up wore the same suit, same jawline, same stillness. Back into 3A, Marcus checked his watch, 7:57 p.m. The deal wouldn't go public until midnight, but the machinery was already turning. He'd made the call in silence, from a seat meant to remind him where they thought he belonged. But he didn't fight it. He used it. Somewhere near row 12, a young Latino man with earbuds turned to his friend. "Dude, he just let it happen. No yelling, no lawsuit threats, just took it. That's power, bro. That's control." Then came the break, the turn. A flight supervisor stepped into the aisle from the cockpit corridor. He wore dark navy with gold epaulettes and a smile that didn't quite know which side of the story it was joining. "Mr. Carter?" Marcus looked up. The voice was softer than Alyssa's, but no less rehearsed. "We've just been informed there was a mix-up. If you'd like to return to your original seat, we can accommodate you now." The words echoed like a refund offered after reputation had already bled out. From row to C, the phone caught everything. Her hand trembled slightly now, not from nerves, but from the weight of watching a system scramble to contain its mistake. Marcus stood, slowly. He straightened his jacket, but didn't move forward. Instead, he asked one question. "Who told you to come back here?" The flight supervisor hesitated. It was a request from corporate. Marcus nodded. "Then tell them the seat is theirs now." Silence, like the kind right before descent. He sat back down. The seat creaked. The moment didn't. Passengers turned again, this time not in judgment, but recognition. They weren't watching a man humiliated. They were watching a man wait not for revenge, but for leverage. Row 1A had been offered back. Marcus Carter had just declined it. Because tonight, he didn't need a seat to make an impact. He just needed time. The plane leveled at 30 for 1,000 feet. Lights dimmed. The cabin hushed. But Marcus Carter wasn't sleeping. In row to 3A, he sat still, hands folded, eyes focused not on the seatback screen in front of him, but on the stillness of consequence. Because up front, just 30 feet away, a game had already shifted. Alyssa passed through the cabin with a tray of drinks. She didn't look his way, but others did. The young woman in to C had lowered her phone now. She didn't need to record anymore. She was watching something else unfold, something quieter than outrage and sharper than shame. The man in 5B, the one who'd laughed earlier, avoided eye contact. So did the silver-haired couple in 1A, now stiff in posture, their champagne untouched. In row 12, a flight attendant named Evan leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "I think that guy just turned down a seat in first class." The other nodded. "He's someone, you can feel it." Evan glanced back toward Marcus. "I think we all just messed up." The seatbelt sign chimed. Nothing else moved. And then a vibration. Marcus glanced at his phone. NIA 8:39 p.m. Final docs cleared. Midnight embargo locked. CNN, CNBC, Forbes, all scheduled. "The moment we drop, they'll feel it." He typed just 2 words. "Let it simmer." Because Marcus knew something they didn't. Silence wasn't surrender, it was pressure. The kind that built, slowly, invisibly, until it couldn't be ignored. In row 7, a black father traveling with his teenage son leaned over and whispered, "That man back there, watch him." "Why?" the boy asked. The father replied, "Because he just taught a master class," and didn't say 10 words. Back near the galley, Alyssa paused. Her posture was different now, less polished, more nervous. She glanced toward 1A, then back to 3A just for a second. She knew something had shifted, but it wasn't about fear. It was about realization, the kind that arrived too late, wrapped in civility and bad decisions. Marcus looked out the window. Clouds moved slowly beneath them, unaware of what was unraveling at 30 for 1,000 feet. Then came a chime, not from the cockpit, but from his inbox. CNBC breaking draft preview. Carter Capital acquires Flightbridge, air primary competitor to Skylix Airlines in all-cash deal. Valued at $4.1 billion, sources say announcement will land at midnight ET. Skylix expected to respond at opening bell. Marcus smiled barely. Not from ego, not from spite, from precision. Because when they dragged him from seat 1A, they thought they'd removed a passenger. They had no idea they'd just escalated a merger. The plane sailed quietly over Missouri airspace. Outside, the sky was calm. Inside, not so much. Tension doesn't always yell. Sometimes it sits in silence, trading glances across first class and economy, whispering its way down the aisle, growing. Into C, the young woman Mia Lang, 24, graduate student, sociology major, finally set her phone on airplane mode. But her mind was racing. She'd seen injustice before, studied it, analyzed it in classrooms. But tonight, she was inside it. And something about how Marcus Carter hadn't reacted, hadn't flinched, hadn't fought unsettled her in a way textbooks never could. He didn't need to yell. He'd already shifted the air in the room. Back into 3A, Marcus checked his watch again. 8:57 p.m. The deal was locked. Press queued. Board signatures sealed. Nothing more to do now but wait and think. He remembered a flight 15 years ago, young, hungry, just sold his first company. upgraded to first class on a whim. They let him in, but treated him like a stowaway. Gave him a plastic cup when everyone else got glass. Asked him twice if he belonged in this cabin. That was the night he decided one day he wouldn't just buy the seat, he'd buy the system that sold it. And now here he was, not just a passenger, but a pivot point. Alyssa came down the aisle again, slower this time, no tray, just presence. She stopped her rows ahead, then hesitated, a pause that felt more like a confession than a delay. "Mr. Carter," she said quietly. A few heads turned, not many, just enough. Marcus looked up. We didn't know," she began. He didn't interrupt. "We weren't told who you were. If we had known." His gaze didn't harden, it didn't soften either. It simply held. "That's the problem," he said. A beat. Alyssa's lips parted, apology or excuse, unclear, but no words followed. Just silence and a slow nod. Then she turned, walking back toward the front, her steps quieter than before. From across the aisle, the teenage boy in row 7 whispered to his dad. What did he mean? The father smiled. "It means respect shouldn't require a resume." A few rows up, Mia Lang opened her notes app. She didn't know why, but something inside her told her to remember this, all of it. By the time the cabin lights dimmed for landing prep, everyone knew something had happened. Not a scandal, not a fight, a shift. Because Marcus Carter hadn't just sat through injustice. He'd watched it expose itself. And when the landing gear dropped over Chicago, so would everything else. The wheels touched down at 9:41 p.m. The soft jolt of arrival rippled through the cabin, followed by polite claps from a few passengers who had no idea what had just flown 900 miles above them. Seatbelt signs blinked off. People reached for bags, pulled jackets from overheads, refreshed their faces into politeness. But Marcus Carter didn't move. He sat into 3A, still, letting everyone else go first. Not out of shame, out of choice. Because real power doesn't need to be first down the aisle. It only needs to make sure the story doesn't get lost in baggage claim. Up front, Alyssa busied herself with plastic smiles and shallow apologies. But even her voice had lost its lift. She kept glancing back. Once, then again, then once more. In first class, the silver-haired couple were already gathering their things. They hadn't made eye contact with anyone since takeoff. Now, they moved quickly like people who know their comfort was complicit. Passengers trickled out, row by row. Mia Lang stayed seated. She wasn't done watching. By the time they reached row 23, only 4 passengers remained. The man from 7B, Mia, Marcus, and the father with his teenage son. And then, as if by silent agreement, they all stood at once. But Marcus raised a hand, not high, just enough, and said quietly, "After you." Mia paused. "You sure?" Marcus nodded. "You've already seen enough tonight. No reason to carry it with you." Her eyes flicked, but she said nothing, just moved past him with a respectful nod. One that said, "I saw everything." And he knew that mattered, because this wasn't just about how he had been treated. It was about what everyone else now knew was normal. The father lingered. "I told my son to watch you," he said softly. "I just wanted to say thanks." Marcus turned slightly. "For what?" "For not yelling, for not giving them what they expected. You showed him what strength looks like." Marcus gave the faintest smile. Then maybe tonight was worth it. They shook hands, and then finally Marcus walked off the plane. Not quickly, not slowly, just absolutely in control. At the jet bridge, Alyssa stood near the exit. She opened her mouth to speak some version of a last-minute save, but Marcus stepped past her, without breaking stride. Not rude, just done. At the terminal, a man in a dark blazer waited by a quiet gate. No sign, no press, just a nod. "Mr. Carter," he said, offering a phone. "Midnight's ready. Press is standing by." Marcus took the phone, looked at the screen. His thumb hovered over the final confirm. He didn't press it, not yet. He looked back once at the jet behind him, then whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "They moved me from seat 1A, but I never left the cockpit." And with that, he tapped send. 9:57 p.m. Chicago O'Hare, gate C-18. No press, no spotlight, just silence and a scheduled detonation. Marcus Carter stood by the frosted windows of a quiet executive lounge annex. His phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time harder. Notifications flooded in. CNBC breaking. Carter Capital acquires Flightbridge Airline for $0.1 billion deal. Forbes, midnight merger sends shockwaves through airline industry. WSJ, Carter's quiet revenge. The dominoes weren't falling. They were collapsing. And none faster than Skylix Airlines, the carrier that had removed him from seat 1A. Just 2 hours ago, a screen behind the bar flickered to news. No sound, just a headline. Flightbridge acquisition confirmed. Skylix shares drop 11% after hours. The bartender glanced at the TV, then at Marcus, then back again, realization slowly blooming. A moment later, a man in a gray suit, mid-50s, stiff posture, Skylix badge entered the lounge. Flanked by two aides, his eyes widened when they landed on Marcus. He stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, I just received the news." Marcus didn't blink. "Good, that means the system works." The executive glanced at his team. "Why Flightbridge? Why now?" Marcus looked out the window toward the tarmac. "Because Flightbridge has what you don't." "And what's that?" the man asked. Marcus turned slowly. "A memory." Silence. The Skylix man swallowed. "If we had known who you were, none of this." "There it is again," Marcus cut in. His tone never rose, but it sliced deeper than any shout. "If you had known." He stepped closer, not threatening, but deliberate. "I don't lead with my title. I don't need to. But your system only respects the label, not the person. That's not service, that's performance." The man looked like he wanted to speak, to apologize, to negotiate, to plead, but all he managed was, "Can we fix this?" Marcus looked at his watch. 10:01 p.m. "No," he said simply, "but you can learn from it, if you still have time." He turned to walk away. But then, from the entrance, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Carter?" It was Mia, the grad student from Row to C. She looked out of breath, but resolute. "I saw the press drop," she said. "It's everywhere now. I just wanted to say." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Say what?" "That it mattered, that someone like me, just a passenger, just watching, needed to see someone like you stay calm and still win." He gave a faint nod. "You recorded?" She hesitated. "I was going to. But you said enough without saying much. I didn't need to." Marcus studied her for a moment, then said, "Good. Because sometimes the story doesn't need a video, it needs a witness." He turned back to the terminal hallway. Behind him, the Skylix team stood frozen. In front of him, the airline world was unraveling, not from protest or fury, but from poise. By 10:17 p.m., Skylix Airlines was hemorrhaging. Stock tickers blinked red across every financial terminal in the terminal. One by one, news anchors whispered the same phrase into cameras. Carter's move wasn't just personal, it was precision. In a dimly lit corner of O'Hare's executive wing, Skylix staff scrambled, not in chaos and fear. Emails flew, PR statements drafted, legal teams pinged. Someone even suggested issuing a public apology before midnight. But there was no time, no coordination, only panic disguised as protocol. And then they made a mistake. An agent junior, nervous, too eager, approached Marcus Carter as he exited the lounge toward his car pickup. "Sir, I've been instructed to recover your boarding pass from flight 719, she said, holding out a hand. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I'm sorry?" "It's standard protocol," she rushed, "for record keeping, internal auditing, nothing personal." He looked at her hand, then back at her eyes. "Standard protocol." "Yes, sir." She wasn't lying. That's what made it worse. Because somewhere, someone thought erase the boarding pass meant erase the problem. Marcus reached into his jacket, pulled out the folded slip, slightly creased, but intact. He held it for a second, then extended it not to her, but to the young man who had just entered behind her, the Skylix regional manager. He took it, scanned the name, flinched. "This says seat 1A. Marcus nodded. "That's the one I paid for." "And this," he asked, "is your signature?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Behind them, another screen updated. Flightbridge app downloads, plus 22,035 minutes. Seat 1A trending 1 globally. Video clip of declined reboarding offer hits 6 meters views in under an hour. The narrative had left the runway, but the airline hadn't caught up, and now they were trying to pull a boarding pass from a man who just bought their worst nightmare. A whisper passed through the team near the Skylix counter. Should we call legal? Do we revoke Miles? Do we flag his name in the system? Marcus turned back to the agent still holding out her hand. I'll save you the audit, he said quietly. Then in full view of them all he tore the boarding pass in half, clean, sharp, like cutting ties, and let it fall gently into a trash bin beside the exit. You don't need my seat, he said. You just need a new system. He walked away. Behind him, no one moved, and somewhere in the silence, someone finally understood. They hadn't just mishandled a boarding procedure. They had mishandled history. 10:31 p.m. Marcus Carter slid into the back seat of a black SUV waiting curbside at Terminal 3. Conference bridge open? He asked, not looking up. The driver part of his security rotation nodded. Secure channel. Global line. 10 countries. 6 zones. 2 minutes to full sync. The door shut. The vehicle pulled into traffic, and Marcus leaned back not to rest, but to begin. He tapped his phone. Exec protocol. Apollo initiated. C-suite, board, intel, engage. The screen flickered. One by one, windows opened. Faces appeared, sharp suits, sharper minds, legal, tech, media, infrastructure. The engine of Carter Capital. Status, he said, voice steady. A woman in London spoke first. Flightbridge integration already trending top 3 globally. We've rerouted their entire first-class algorithm to ours overnight. Customer opt-in at 74%. A man from Singapore followed. Skylix's internal systems breached through legal pathways. We now have full view of partner contracts and fleet gaps. Another voice chimed in. CNN just requested a morning segment. They want to reframe this as a systemic dignity failure. Ewan? Marcus paused. No need for interviews. They waited. He continued. Upload the timestamp footage to archive. Let the public tell the story. Our power is never in how loud we speak, it's in how quietly we move. Silence across the line. Then, a ripple of nods. This wasn't a press cycle. It was a recalibration. Back in Chicago, the Skylix terminal was unraveling. Calls weren't being returned. A junior agent had fainted from pressure. HR was fielding calls from inside and outside, employees panicking about internal reviews, canceled upgrades, and worse, a culture report they never expected to go public. Someone had leaked the Slack messages. A line from one read. Keep the high-end seats clean. No hoodies, no questions. Looks matter. It wasn't just protocol. It was proof. And Marcus didn't need to scream it across airwaves. He just needed to aim it precisely. In the SUV, a final voice joined the call. His chief of staff. We've secured naming rights if you want it. Flightbridge is offering to rename their elite tier after you. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm not here to be a brand. A pause. Then what do we call this? He looked out the window as the city passed by in blurred lights. Correction. And then just as the car pulled onto Lower Wacker Drive, he gave his final instruction. Start drafting the shareholder letter. Subject line. Seat 1A was never the issue. 10:49 p.m. The Carter SUV pulled into the underground level of the Ledger, a 68-story smart tower downtown, where tech meets finance and privacy is protected like currency. Marcus stepped out. A silent nod to security. Elevator doors opened without a button pressed. Top floor. Inside the glass-wrapped boardroom, 6 people waited. Legal, ops, public affairs, data. Everyone silent. Everyone standing. On the center screen, real-time metrics. Flightbridge traffic, plus 312%. Skylix institutional trust score, down 38%. Marcus Carter seat 1A corporate Terracon, all trending globally. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't even slow down. He walked to the head of the table, unbuttoned his jacket, and sat. Only then did he speak. Let's put a name to what happened. Everyone straightened. Not just discrimination, he continued. Not just profiling. What happened tonight was systemic rehearsal, a performance baked into their culture. He pointed to the leaked Slack message projected on the sidewall. No hoodies, no questions. You think that policy came from one person? He asked. No one answered. It came from their business model. He tapped once on the tablet before him. Instantly, the screens shifted. A live broadcast. CNBC anchor, urgent tone. We've just received confirmation that Marcus Carter, billionaire founder of Carter Capital, and now controlling stakeholder in Flightbridge, was the passenger denied his seat on Skylex Flight 719 earlier tonight. Cut to panelists, gasps. Cut to the footage. Marcus standing silently in row 23. The torn boarding pass. The trash bin. Then back to studio. This could be the most costly act of discrimination in modern corporate history. In the boardroom, no one breathed. Marcus leaned back. That's the story they're running with. Let them. His assistant entered the room, holding a folder. Shareholder letter finalized, she said. And the final printout you requested. She handed him a glossy image. A freeze frame of Alyssa, in mid-sentence, gesturing toward seat 1A. Marcus looked at it, just for a moment, then turned it face down on the table. This isn't about her, he said quietly. This is about all of them. He stood. I don't need her name. I don't need apologies. I don't even need justice. Everyone waited. I needed people to remember what happens when silence is mistaken for submission. He looked directly into the lens of the room's secure stream, broadcasting to every stakeholder in the Carter ecosystem. I didn't lose a seat tonight. I gained an audience. He paused, let the weight settle. And now they know. 11:08 p.m. Skylex Airlines HQ 17th floor, West Tower, Atlanta. Every screen in the crisis room was red. Emails pinged. Legal teams argued. PR phones rang unanswered. The footage had hit all major networks. The still image of Marcus Carter calm, unmoved, in row 23 had become a symbol. The torn boarding pass now floated across timelines like a declaration. But it wasn't the public they feared. It was the internal collapse. The HR director whispered into a Zoom call. Staff are asking if we're next, if videos exist, if the Slack messages will leak more. The chief operating officer, he'd locked himself in his office, blamed jet lag. Rumor was, he was the one who wrote the phrase "no hoodies, no questions" 5 years ago. By 11:11 p.m., it wasn't just reputational. It was operational. One regional director emailed, Flightbridge just terminated our shared access to VIP lounges in 6 cities. Another followed. Hotel partner chain wants written clarification on our racial equity policy. Before renewing contract, the hemorrhage was no longer metaphorical. Meanwhile, at O'Hare's employee corridor, Alyssa, still in uniform, sat alone. Her badge had been taken for review. A manager had told her to take some time and stay quiet. But it wasn't the silence that scared her. It was the echo. Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger sister. I saw him on CNN. You really told Marcus Carter to move seats. No emojis, no judgment, just disbelief. Her hands shook, not because she'd been recorded, but because she had no idea who she'd spoken to. Not a customer, not a man in a hoodie, but a man who now held the future of the airline and maybe her in his hands. At the same time, a junior agent at Skylex's customer service center pressed send on a resignation email. Subject line, if this is how we're trained, I'm done flying for you. By 11:27 p.m., the brand team had abandoned all pre-scheduled marketing. By 11:32, 3 mid-level managers had received legal notices to preserve chat history. And by 11:41, the internal board group chat, usually quiet after hours, lit up. He owns the competitor now. Do we even have leverage? Has anyone reached out directly? What if he sues? Then, too late. Because Marcus Carter hadn't sued. He hadn't screamed. He'd just shown the world exactly how much power he didn't need to prove. And now, everyone was watching. Not the influencers, not the activists, but the shareholders, the partners, the employees. And they all had the same expression. We didn't just lose a seat. We might have lost everything. 11:58 p.m. Back inside the ledger, Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the executive lounge. Chicago blinked beneath him, glass, steel, consequence. Behind him, the boardroom was quiet, not from tension, from closure. Everything had been decided. A soft chime. His chief of staff re-entered, holding a sealed envelope. It's done. she said. Legal delivered the cancellation. Media team scheduled embargo. Marcus took the envelope, didn't open it. He already knew what was inside. The official termination of Carter Capital's $212 million logistics contract with Skylux Airlines. Effective immediately. No renegotiation. No callback clause. He didn't need vengeance. He just needed clarity. And this was a message. He turned to the team still seated around the table. "You can all go," he said. "Tonight was about listening. Tomorrow we start building." They nodded. No speeches. No handshakes. Just respect, the kind that doesn't need to be declared. As they filed out, one junior strategy lead paused. "Sir, may I ask why not earlier? Why not push this months ago when the talks first went bad?" Marcus looked at him. "Because I don't move out of anger," he said. A pause. "I move when it matters." The doors closed behind them. Silence returned. But outside, across the tarmac of Skylux's midnight operations, across boardrooms still in shock, the impact had already landed. At 12:02 a.m., Skylux's main logistics partner logged into their procurement system. A red banner appeared. Primary freight lane canceled. No alternate carrier listed. Phone calls began, scrambled, desperate. But Carter's legal team had done it clean. No leaks, no delays, just precision. At 12:05, Skylux's interim CEO, the former CFO, now very tired, opened the full termination letter. It was only 2 pages long, but the closing sentence would be quoted in headlines by morning. "We no longer entrust our cargo to carriers who mishandle people. Not passengers, people." Across the city, Mia Lang sat in her apartment, rereading an article about the deal. Her fingers hovered over her screen. Then she opened LinkedIn. Typed, "Tonight I witnessed dignity handled like data, precise, quiet, undeniable. Thank you, Mr. Carter, for showing us what measured power looks like." She didn't tag him, didn't need to. Some names don't require hyperlinks. They carry weight on their own. And back at Skylux HQ, the damage wasn't just fiscal, it was structural. Vendors were pulling out. A pending IPO had been delayed indefinitely. And someone no one knew who had submitted an anonymous ethics report from inside the C-suite. The audit clock had started ticking, and the clock was now Carter's. 12:27 a.m. The Ledger rooftop. Chicago was silent beneath him now, traffic thinned, lights soft. Only the hum of a city that didn't yet know it had just changed. Marcus Carter stood at the edge, coat buttoned against the wind. No cameras, no entourage. Just him and a sky that stretched farther than any boardroom ceiling ever could. His phone buzzed once more. Final update. Analytics, impact, reach, market shift, board turnover rumors. He didn't open it. Tonight wasn't about metrics. It was about memory. Behind him, the last of the lights inside the building flicked off. His team had gone. Executives, lawyers, assistants, all dismissed. They'd done their part. But this part, the end, was his alone. Because what they took from him wasn't just a seat. It was assumption. It was certainty. It was the comfort of thinking you know who belongs where. And he'd returned it all with interest. No rage, no press tour, no hashtags. Just a movement. Measured, surgical, public, and yet untouchable. Across the country, Skylux's leadership began waking up to a new world. A canceled contract here. A board inquiry there. An emergency all-hands scheduled for 6 a.m. with no agenda because no one could name what exactly. They'd lost because they hadn't lost a deal. They'd lost credibility. And there's no rebooking that kind of damage. Somewhere in Texas, a high school debate coach pulled up the story and emailed it to his students. Subject line, "Power doesn't shout." In Atlanta, a flight attendant who'd never met Alyssa cried quietly in her kitchen, not out of guilt, but because she recognized the tone. In New York, a black woman in a pantsuit screenshot the headline and whispered, "This one's for us." And in Lagos, in London, in Queens, people were watching, quietly, closely, not because it was sensational, but because it was familiar. Back on the rooftop, Marcus Carter pulled out what remained of the torn boarding pass. He hadn't thrown both halves away, just one. He held the other, now weathered, folded, a reminder. Then, gently, he let it go. The wind caught it, lifted it over the edge, out into the air, gone. He turned, walked toward the elevator, and just before the doors closed, he said not to anyone present, but to the world now watching. They thought removing me from seat 1A was the end of a story. Turns out, it was only the headline. Fade to black.